This is the world according to Jen and Carolyn. Are you afraid?
Only of my fears.
Be afraid. Every time. So we're going to be talking about fear today, and more specifically our fascination with fear. But I swear every time I hear the word fear, all I think is that Mark Wahlberg movie with him and Reese Witherspoon, which I fucking love.
That's literally what just popped into my head.
Yeah, I see Mark Wahlberg, that that GIF or GIF I always send you, where he's like looking hella crazy at the door, and then carving Nicole forever into his chest,
and then hitting his chest.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, we watched that show or that movie in psychology class, which we took our senior year of high school, and of course we were like, just completely and totally immature.
That movie's great.
It is
talk
great.
about love bombing.
Yeah.
And obsession.
That's why we watched it in psychology class. Mr. Zawardo was very cool. So we watched that. We watched Something About Mary, and we watched Sybil.
What was the stuff for Something About Mary?
I don't remember. But it might have been a treat, like end of the year treat. Mr. Zawardo was so awesome. He was this total Italian American dude, as you can probably imagine by the name. When he was young, he was gorgeous. He wore cowboy boots. He would sneak into the bushes at lunch to smoke his cigarettes. I remember this one dude brought him student brought him a present. It was a bottle of vodka, and he didn't turn him in. He's like, "Thanks, dude," and took it. Like,
hey, that's good. He took it away from the under 21-year-old.
He did what he was supposed to do. Oh my God. I think he might have passed away. So this is no longer, I might have to bleep his name out. I feel bad. I also think he passed away. So R.I.P. dude.
And he had a very strong influence on you.
He did. So, positive influence. Yes. It was the first time that I came out about my mom being gay was in it was family life class. Half of the semester was psychology. Half was family life.
What a cool class.
I know.
Teach that.
It was amazing. He was amazing. This was the 90s.
Are amazing.
They are.
They're all coming back to school. Hooray for teachers. We have lots of teacher listeners, and I'm sure they're afraid.
Yes. Happy first day of school for many of you.
That are happening.
Yes. There's a lot going on. Yeah. It's the first day of school for a lot of folks out there. My kids started last week on a Thursday, minimum day, very random, whatever, Catholic school. So we're not here to talk to you about the strange schedule of Catholic school, but we are here to talk to you about why so many humans enjoy the feeling of being afraid. We're pretty sure that this is unique to human animals and probably has a lot to do with fictional fear versus a genuine threat of saying, like, being abducted or being eaten alive by something, hopefully not a person. Regardless of the source, I think fear is stressful, but I also enjoy some feelings of fear in a safe environment. So we're going to talk about that. What is wrong with us? Why do we like this feeling of fear? We're going to talk about the psychology and dissect why so many of us actually relish in this feeling of being scared out of our minds. So Carolyn, do you like being afraid?
I call myself fear curious.
I like it.
I'm that person who will watch something scary, but only under certain conditions. So like, it has to be daytime. I have to be with a group of friends. I can't be alone that night. In fact, when I was writing this, after it got dark and like around 9:00, I had to go get laundry out of the basement and I wouldn't go.
Well, that basement is really scary.
Well, it doesn't help when my friend Jen calls me on phones and tells me that the phone's been disconnected for years.
Oh yeah. So folks, I think we've mentioned this in a previous episode, but so Carolyn lives in my mother-in-law's house. My mother-in-law now lives in assisted living. Carolyn rents the place, and there's still a bunch of stuff downstairs, including a hard line, a landline.
What's that?
One time, I know nobody knows what that is. A phone you plug into the wall. And so when she first moved in, she was like, the phone's ringing downstairs. She's like, what is that? And I was like, dude, I don't know. We disconnected that line years ago.
I hate
and she was like, what the fuck? I'm like, psych, bitch. I was like, for some reason, Bill wants to keep it. So it's always like the Republican Party calling to like ask for donations.
But see, it's scary. So yeah, and like it's kind of weird. I do this thing when I am watching scary movies where I cover my eyes, but then I'll peek.
Yeah.
It's so weird.
Yeah.
And I also remember though having my first real feelings of anxiety when a friend wanted to do a haunted house ride at Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk.
Oh, I
remember like feeling like, ooh, that's going to be really scary. And I did it because I didn't want to look like a dork in front of my friend. But all the Halloween movies, everyone always wanted to watch horror movies at slumber parties. Yeah. And it wasn't until my freshman year when we watched The Lost Boys at a sleepover. Yes. And I discovered how scary movies also mean you might get to watch hot vampires bang under Jim Morrison posters. And kind of the rest is history. But I think there's this correlation between horror movies and being cool. Yeah. Like kids who watch like scary movies or like the R-rated movies are always a lot cooler.
Oh yeah. Like when you tell your mom you're going to see Newsies, but you're actually going to see Stephen King's Sleepwalkers. Yeah. That was my fifth grade.
How old were you? Oh God.
Fifth grade. Yeah. So
in 5th grade,
10 or 11. Yeah.
And that didn't give you nightmares?
I mean, that's the thing. Okay, so I've always been a horror fan. Mm-hmm. I was reading Stephen King when I was in 5th grade, scary stories to tell in the dark as I think 3rd grade, which by the way, like that's a kid's book.
Yes.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy. That would scare the shit out of my child. He's also not even 7 yet, but by high school, we were going to the cemetery at night and, I was fucking into it.
See, like that doesn't scare me though.
Really?
Like actual things that are like cemeteries or learning about like true crime or things that are frightening don't scare me as much as a movie.
Okay, that kind of makes sense. The cemetery, there's actually something to be afraid of there at night because you don't know who living is lurking in that motherfucker. You gotta watch out. The dead do not scare me. It's the living, man. Like,
good point.
Somebody could have jumped out and it fucked us up. We were like 14 years old. So, but that's also the stupidity of being a teenager, right? You're like, oh, I'm going and, for the thrill of going to the cemetery at night. But,
where else were we going to go?
This is true.
We couldn't do anything.
It was true. And I'd stay at my friend Melina's house and we'd sneak out in the middle of the night because her grandma, she probably knew what was going on. Yeah. My mom didn't care where I was. And so we would go and just hang out in the cemetery. I can remember coming home at dawn. It was crazy.
Wow.
Yeah.
You were really cool, Jen.
cool, neglected. Pick the word. So before we delve into why
I just want to hug you. Can I hug you right now?
Somebody threatened to hug me this week and it made me think of you.
I only get 1 or 2 a year.
You really do.
When was your birthday?
Yeah. I got to be drunk
and
usually.
My birthday. I got one on my birthday.
Yay!
Yes, you do let me hug you when you're drunk.
Yes, I have to be under the influence. That's trauma. So before we delve into why we like to be scared and under what circumstances we enjoy being afraid, that's very important. We're going to read to you from a list that came from Chapman University that covers 10 biggest fears in the U.S. And these are really relatable and not very fun.
No. So, here we go.
This is from 2023. Number 1, 60% of the people polled are afraid of corrupt government officials.
Ding, ding.
Yeah, I can relate to that. Yeah. 54.7%. They're afraid of economic or financial collapse.
It's same.
Yeah. 52.5%, Russia using nukes.
Yeah.
Very relatable. 52.3%, the U.S. becoming involved in another world war. Also, yeah.
Clearly, we're funding many of them.
We are. Yes.
Oops, did I say that? Yes, I did.
Yes, we have the receipts. 50% roughly. People I love becoming seriously ill.
Oh,
yep, that's a big fear.
One, yeah.
And then right below that, people I love dying.
Yes.
Huge. 50% pollution of drinking water.
Oh.
Yeah.
I don't know if I think of, well, we're very privileged to live in San Francisco.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are.
Very clean tap water.
We're not in Michigan. So, yeah. 49.5% biological warfare.
Hell yeah.
Yep.
Dude, I'm still afraid when I'm in a crowd that it was just like an urban legend. Someone's going to stick you with a syringe.
I mean,
were people doing, or like, remember they say in the payphone, if you went and they never checked for change because there could be syringes in there.
I don't know about
still think about that.
But there was a dude in Japan. We covered him, I think, on the serial killer episode. I'm almost positive he used biological weapons on a train and people died. See, this is why, like, you're riding the bus and shit. The bus is a little more, you got access to the outside real easy.
Yes.
Bart I do not like BART. I don't like being under the water trapped.
100%.
Or in a tunnel.
No, tunnels are, anytime I go through a tunnel, I'm like, or even on the bridge.
Yeah.
I wouldn't drive over the bridge when I first got my car.
Oh, really?
I was really freaked out.
Well, we're children.
Earthquakes.
Yeah, we're children of the 1989 earthquake where the bridge actually
Bad
collapsed.
things happen on freeways and overpasses.
It's
underpasses.
very true. It's very true. What else do we have here? 49.3% cyber terrorism. That's actually a huge threat. And 48% not having enough money for the future. Yeah, a lot of us can relate to that.
I think I'm already in that. I don't have enough money for the now.
Yeah, this is a fear I live with daily, everybody. So, all of those are like legit ass fears with the possibility of becoming true. And I think most of us live with a lot of these fears every day, especially the money stuff. But science tells us that we like to be scared. Probably not of these things, but more of like the intangible. So we're going to talk to you about why, and again, under what circumstances we enjoy being afraid. So according to this Forbes article we found, your brain and body are conditioned to find pleasure in situations that push your normal boundaries and seek out safe but abnormal situations. Cool. Safety is key. This is from a Cleveland Clinic article. According to psychologist Shavana Childs, she's a PhD. The thing that distinguishes good fear from bad fear is our perception of safety. Fear lets us know what we need to run from, she says, or when we need to run. If there's a bear coming, I know what I need to do. I got to go or, fight. I'll fight a bear.
Are you supposed to get bigger?
I don't know if that's a bear thing. I think that might be a mountain lion thing.
I don't know. I'm going to die.
I would never survive in the wild.
We probably should figure that out.
It's very true. And one of the last hikes I went on, my friend saw a rattlesnake.
Oh, God.
So yeah, that scares the shit out of me. So this same person continues, there's also a good side to fear. And that's what scary movies, true crime, and haunted houses tap into. We understand that there's an end to those experiences, that the bear's not going to get us. We know that going through a haunted house is just for fun, that it's only people in costumes, but it still rings those bells for adrenaline, endorphins, and dopamine. So you experience this euphoria because you know you're safe.
That makes total sense.
It does. It does. Except we're going to talk about a haunted house that, people thought they were going to be safe, but it didn't end up that way. So this is from a Today article. Horror films in particular allow us to explore the experience of fear in an enjoyable and safe way. They also allow us to identify with the bad guy without getting ourselves into too much trouble. Many of us have a need to expose ourselves to sensations, expose ourselves,
not to people,
experience sensations, which are different from our daily routine. It makes sense. Yeah. Most of us have blissfully boring lives, right? We're not running from killers on a regular basis or, even encountering somebody who has the potential to kill us or the inclination to kill us. So seeing these things, that makes sense.
It does make sense.
Ring some bells. So I thought this was fascinating. Have you ever wondered why people laugh as they get off a roller coaster or leave a theater after a really scary movie? It's because we're enjoying the chemical rush that we get when we're threatened, minus all the stress. I thought that was really cool. So, Dr. Childs ends with, getting scared without being in real danger can be very cathartic. It improves our mood. We've let out some stress. We've screamed a little, so we feel a little bit better. And after we've been to a good scary movie or walked through a haunted house, this is how we feel. So, Carolyn, I talked about adrenaline, endorphins, and dopamine. So what is going on for us psychologically when we're afraid?
Fear is really interesting. It's one of my favorite emotions to learn about because so much of what we go through has to do with this and understanding often in psychotherapy, when you can understand these chemical mechanisms and put sort of some hard science in what you're feeling. It's really helpful to then go, okay, here's what's happening for me. You can talk yourself through things a lot easier. But fear always seemed very simple to me. But when you read the studies and the kind of the biology, it's real. The neuroscience and the chemicals are a little complicated. So let me do my best. And again, this is where I get confused too, but
we're not neuroscientists.
Well, I'll do my best here. So here's some key points that, we linked the article. It's by Ralph Adolphs. He actually looked at all the different, a meta-analysis of different literature and kind of picked apart, like, here's how you study something that's sort of conscious and subconscious. And we're always trying to say, like, well, where in the brain is this happening? What things going on? And it's so individual. And we also study this, you mentioned, on animals. Well, how do you know if an animal is afraid? How do you can't ask it. So we're basing this off of fear and panic are something called a neurofunctional term that cause specific cascades in humans that are both emotionally and physiologically experienced in all of us. But the context and the intensity always differs. Okay. So case in point, I would actually call something I'm afraid of kind of like a meta emotion. Okay. My feelings about a feeling. You and I both have different feelings about being afraid.
For sure. It depends on your experiences.
Yes. And surprise is another one where I don't like surprises.
I don't either. No.
But some people like if you...
I've been robbed at gunpoint. Yeah, I don't like surprises.
No, I don't either. We're planners. Yeah. So, again, it's so context specific, but fear is also adaptive and evolutionary, and it's 100% central to our survival, and we need it. And fear is experienced in your reptile brain. Yep. So that's your most primitive part of your brain. That's what we call it, the reptile brain. Yeah. The part of your brain that we're actually talking about is your amygdala. Anyone who knows about anxiety or trauma probably has heard, or I hope you've heard or read about the amygdala. And it's basically, anxiety is just nerve bundles in this area of the amygdala. And they're also, I'll go a little bit more nerdy here, right next to the amygdala, there's another bed of neurons called the stria terminalis. And these are really interconnected parts of the deep primitive brain. They're connected to safety and survival. And what they do is they send signals directly to your brainstem and then down into your gut, down into your nervous system and your vagus nerve that innervates all your organs. And that also goes both ways.
Must be why people shit themselves sometimes when they're extremely afraid.
Yes. Or vomit or all these things. Yeah. Rest, digest, or tend and befriend, as we like to say too. That this is all very interconnected. Your brain and your gut were actually formed from the same cell in utero. So there's when you're talking really about mental health, about any of the emotions, you can't talk about one without talking about the other.
That's why I have IBS from all the trauma I experienced.
I wouldn't be surprised. That deep connection
between the two.
Yes. We'll do some vagal nerve breathing later. So, again, these send messages to your five senses and they interact with how the amygdala receives these messages. You've also, I don't know if you've ever heard of like the fear face.
No. What does that look like?
So I just did it at you. Did I look scared? Why? So in couples therapy, and this is very Darwinian too, because fear is one of the things that you also see in a lot of animals, at least in mammalian animals. I don't know if you can tell if a fish or an invertebrate is
They just swim the fuck off. Yeah, I don't know.
100%. So wide eyes, and think about what the evolutionary helpfulness in that. You're able to see more. Yeah. Flared nostrils, you can take in more smell. And unfortunately, this is a facial expression that is going to communicate sometimes to your partner stress. And they might look angry. They might look like, if you got a face like that when you're talking, I'd be like, what? Is that, why are you looking at me like that? What's the matter? What's wrong with anyway, you can't see our faces right now. But this is important when we're now talking about the neurotransmitters, because as I mentioned, your brainstem and that vagus nerve innervates all these facial muscles and then sends messages to the body. So I appreciated the simplicity, again, from the Cleveland Clinic article, of what these neurotransmitters. So you mentioned epinephrine, norepinephrine, and actually a different one. It's actually glutamate. Oh, okay. That comes in, there is the dopamine side, but it comes in a little bit more on the after side. So we have these receptors in neurons. Neurons are the space in between the neuron and the receptors, the synapse. And neurotransmitters are basically like your body's chemical messengers, right? And they carry messages from one nerve cell to another space, to the next nerve, and then into muscles, and then into glands and cells, yada, yada, yada. So they help move your limbs, feel sensations, they're attached to heartbeat, taking in oxygen, taking in and responding to information, and then sending it out and in through the environment. So epinephrine is commonly what you think of when you talk about adrenaline. That's kind of the fancy way of saying adrenaline. And it's your body's, like I mentioned, fight or flight response to fear or stress. Fear itself is like, like when you're driving and maybe you have to swerve really quick to get around something. That's fear taking over and saving your life. You can kind of think of fight, flight, flee as fear to me. That's sort of a better way. We often associate fear with the after effects, which is more of the panic or sort of the rush of that adrenaline. You give epinephrine if someone's having a allergic reaction, or I had to have it once when I had a respiratory issue. It kicks your body into gear. You're going.
It's speed, bro.
Literally. And it stimulates your body's response. It increases your heart rate. It increases your breathing. It dilates everything, your blood pressure, your blood sugar, your blood flow. It helps you survive. This is a huge plus.
This is not your thinking brain. This is not your frontal lobe. This is pure reptile, baby.
In fact, I'm glad you said that, because in that moment, you're actually not using your prefrontal cortex at all, which is why we should not argue or try and have a rational conversation when we're in a fight with a partner or when we're activated. How long do you think it takes for adrenaline to be cleared out of your body through the bloodstream?
I don't know, but you need some deep breaths to get there. That's all I know.
And thank you for saying deep exhales. It's actually not the inhale. It's the exhale that relieves that. It does go out of your body. It takes about 20 minutes. I'm exhausted. I need about 24 hours. If I've had a really big thing happen, I get real sleepy and then I need to fall asleep.
It's like children who have an incident at school and you can tell they're like really heightened, and having a conversation with them in that moment is not going to be a good idea,
especially when you make them look at you in the face. That's actually the most cruel thing you could do to a small child. That people are like, look at me. And that used to be a thing with neurodiverse. We'd be like, look at me. It's or like doing this to them. Oh, sorry, I just put my hand up against my eye. You can't see that. So again, epinephrine, adrenaline. Norepinephrine is also called noradrenaline. It does the same thing. It increases blood pressure and heart rate, but it's more about the alertness, the arousal, decision-making, attention, and focus. And then lastly, the other one that comes in is glutamate. And this is the most excitatory neurotransmitter in your nervous system. So again, think excitement. This plays a key role in the cognitive thinking, learning, behavior. The dopamine really only comes in that reward system. So this is when you talked about how there's sort of a cathartic feeling, or there's a rush, or there's a pleasure or heightened arousal. And we'll talk about this more later in the podcast. That's really where you're seeing the dopamine come in. And that's why it can be a little addicting if you enjoy and have a pleasurable experience from horror movies. Because when we get scared, we experience that rush of adrenaline, the release of endorphins, and then usually dopamine comes in and soothes everything out. That's how it should go nicely. I survived. And again, so you're right. It's an opioid-like sense of euphoria. So it's a good thing. And that's your body working well. So people will come to therapy and they're saying, well, here's what happened. I'm like, can't fix normal. That's great. Your body works. If I ring a really loud bell right now and you startle, that's fear.
Totally.
I'm really glad you have it. And absolutely not. We are not going to give you a coping skill to take your fear away. But why are you feeling that way at work?
Totally.
Let's talk about that. Or why are you feeling that way with your partner or your family? Or your husband?
No, let's answer those questions, but not in this episode. Maybe another one. But I alluded to this earlier. What happens when we think we're in a safe space and we're having a safe experience with fear, and it takes a really dark ass turn? This is exactly what happened. What people claim are happening, rather, I believe that it happened, which is chronicled in this documentary called Monster Inside. I had to turn it off, actually. It was crazy. So the whole premise of this is essentially, this is from I'm going to read to you from this Hollywood Reporter interview that breaks it all down and really made me think about this a bit differently insofar as why people subjected themselves to this in the first place. Not that I'm blaming the victims, but I was curious, right?
I can't wait.
I was curious. So Monsters Inside or Monster Inside. Monsters Inside is that other one about like parasites and
that
shit.
freaks me out.
That's frightening.
That frightens me.
I don't want a
living
tapeworm.
inside.
Yeah,
No.
or anything that gets into my brain.
Right?
No, thank you. So Monster Inside, America's most extreme haunted house, centers on McCamey Manor, a torture tour about 70 miles outside of Nashville. It merges documentary storytelling with the visual and cinematic language of a horror film. It follows 3 participants and explores why people make themselves vulnerable to harm. This is Hulu's synopsis from The Hollywood Reporter. So basically these folks are like, I want to be the star of my own horror film. And, you know, they usually chronicle their ordeal live on social media. They're like, how many people can I get to follow me and watch live, et cetera? You know, it's all about, talk about endorphins, right? This is where people get, you know, that pleasurable sensation from these days. A lot of times is social media gratification.
Totally.
And so they're getting that. And then they're going into this environment where they're going to be subjected to their own horror film. If I remember correctly, they told the McCamey dude, like, this is what scares me the most. And that motherfucker incorporated that into the experience. But so the filmmaker said, when I dug in, it didn't take me long to realize that why they, Lion TV entity, or Lion TV, it's an entity that had the footage, why they had the footage. What they had was a true story about people all around the world wanting to be stars in their own real life horror film. They seek out the most extreme experiences to satisfy this urge, and McCamey Manor was there where they all found themselves. So they went to this place. It had initially been in San Diego, I believe. If I'm not mistaken, it was shut down because they were doing crazy shit. So let's talk about the crazy shit that these participants are alleging happened in this fucking haunted house. So
Sounds
shit
like Saw.
Yes. It's torture porn. It's fucking crazy, which is why I had to turn it off. It was too much for me.
I can't imagine.
Yes. So according to the participants who were profiled in this documentary, they willingly agreed to enter this crazy immersive experience. They claim that in spite of wanting to stop when shit got too real, the horror did not stop. Basically, fuck your safe word. Like, this dude kept going.
Oh,
dude,
that's not right.
The thing I remember the most is this one woman said she had a fear of spiders. This motherfucker strapped her down and was putting spiders on her face, tarantulas. And I was like, turn it off. Turn it off. Spiders are, I kind of draw the line at tarantulas. I had a really bad experience on acid when I was 14 with an actual tarantula.
Oh, shit.
We're not going to talk about that, but I saw it explode on the floor. It was awful. A lot of tracers.
And on your face?
Oh, yeah. On her face. I had to turn it off. It was too much. You can tell these people were legitimately scared.
You could die from being scared.
You can have a heart attack.
Yeah.
So the Tennessee Attorney General actually got involved. His name is Jonathan Scarmetti, and announced that his office is looking into McCamey Manor. Assistant Attorney General Christine Knowles said McCamey Manor either does not offer or honor a means for participants to stop the tour. In Hulu's 2023 documentary about McCamey Manor, she's quoted as, or someone is quoted as saying, we're known for no quitting and no safe wording. So they're like actually bragging about that. Yeah.
Can you do that? Is that legal?
I don't think so.
Oh, I would sue.
I think so I'll talk about the waiver that these folks signed and the circumstances that they were signing these waivers under. And then from what I understand, they couldn't obtain these waivers after the fact. So
sounds sketchy.
Yeah. The Assistant Attorney General continues in this article. Participants do not have access to the lengthy waiver that describes the risks involved with a tour before signing up. That's what it was. Traveling long distances to Tennessee or even before the tour begins. Former participants described the adrenaline and pressure they felt when reviewing the waiver at the start of the tour. One interviewee from the Hulu documentary stated, I had too much excitement going through my veins at one time. If the waiver would have said that a man is going to come out of the woods and murder you during this event, I would have signed that shit. Yeah. The filmmaker said in the interview, so this was, the description of what happened. And then in addition to that, an interview with the actual filmmaker. And this filmmaker said, when I started watching the videos of McCamey Manor, I honestly couldn't believe what I was seeing. And I thought it had to be fake. It was some of the most horrific imagery I had ever seen in my life. People being tied up and tortured, waterboarded, locked in freezer boxes. Oh, the locking in the freezer box. It's like lined with carpet, if I remember correctly, or I'm conflating this with like a true crime thing I listened to on a podcast. But like these motherfuckers are going into this tiny box and being shut in. If you're like, my fear is claustrophobia, this guy's like, oh, cool, I'm going to incorporate that in.
So they tell them the fear and they think they don't know he's going to use that.
I think so. I'm almost positive that part of this, and I'm going from memory from watching the documentary because I don't think it came up in this interview, but I'm almost positive that was part of it.
I don't think I could watch this either.
It's hard.
Watch people genuinely being tortured.
They were
that's
freaked.
usually even the part of like, what was that movie? The Cell.
Oh, I never watched it. Is that Jennifer Lopez?
Fucked me up. It's Jennifer Lopez and Vince Vaughn.
I do like Vince Vaughn.
He's good in it, but that movie, I still think about that movie.
I'll avoid it. I don't like any sort of like real life or potential real life type scenarios. That's why I like paranormal stuff.
Yeah.
Because I don't really believe. Maybe I have some inclination to believe, but
no, this was way too real.
Yeah, that's the problem. So, he was saying it's some of the most horrific shit he's ever seen. And there were thousands of people going through this experience from all around the world and millions of people tuning in to watch. The kicker, though, is that everyone went there with the notion that they could stop at any time, that this was in their control. And at the end of the day, but they didn't end up being the case.
That's awful.
The filmmaker really wanted to understand the folks who would be willing to subject themselves to this type of shit. And there seems to be a common thread. Trauma.
Well, but they didn't know they were going to subject themselves to that.
No, but here's what he says that makes a lot of sense. So, and I want you to elaborate on this. He said, these were all people that were trying to heal from their past traumas and wanted to push themselves to such extremes as a way to grow and conquer those fears that had consumed them for so much of their lives. I found this so relatable. So I guess like immersive therapy or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
Like facing your fears, exposure therapy. Yeah. But they thought, hey, if I get too freaked out, I can stop. And it never stopped.
That's an interesting take on it then.
I mean, tell me, is there any therapeutic value in pushing yourself in extreme and terrifying ways as a means to heal from or conquer your past trauma?
Oh, God. I mean, it's a great question. And I think there is a lot to be said about pushing past a fear.
Yeah.
To build it in the realm of kind of more confidence and self-esteem.
Yeah.
I do think there's no better rush or feeling of accomplishment than thinking I can't do something and then doing it. And even when I watched the scary movie, I felt cool. Yeah. I felt like, and that wasn't so bad. And then that then dictated, well, remember when you watch this, it's just actors, don't worry. Yep. You'll have something to talk about. It made me happier. So I do think that that's how we stack when we stack tolerance like that. I don't think you should ever, definitely not in the therapeutic realm. This doesn't sound like this was
this guy's therapy. Not a therapist.
I would
far
never, from it. ever push someone past their comfort zone. Yeah. I don't think that's healthy. And I think that's a bigger risk. My concern also, and I can speak from personal experience, when you start limiting yourself more and more, that also stacks. Yeah. And that can also be limiting as well. Yeah. Now, do I really think it matters? I have a fear of earthquakes. An earthquake's probably going to happen. Yeah. I'll be okay. I'll make it through. I know that. I don't have a fear of spiders. If I did, I just would go, well, I'll never be around spiders. Yeah. I'm not going to push. I personally don't think if that's your fear, why should you push yourself to be uncomfortable?
Yeah. I'm not going to do heights.
Right. You don't freak have out. To. Yeah, you don't have to. Exactly. But I can understand why people do. Yeah. And like I said, I've had it both ways. Yeah. My parents allowed, I don't want to say they allowed me. I think they did what they thought was best. And in their defense, I was so somatically ill from the anxiety. No one knew what that anxiety was from or talked about it. And now I spent many years in therapy doing that. But I would throw up. Yeah. I would get viscerally sick. And they were both doctors. They're like, oh, you're sick. Yeah. Even though they'd be like, oh, you're fine. You just threw up. But,
walk it off.
They would say, you don't have to do it. Yeah. Oh, camp is scary. You don't have to go. You can stay home.
Yeah.
Oh, the field trip is scary. You don't have to go.
Yeah.
And this led on and on and on to a point. You've even watched me do this too, where something really shitty happens. I shut down.
Mm-hmm.
And when I allow myself to do that and everyone sort of coddles and feels sorry and goes, oh yeah, no, don't push yourself, versus no, you're coming with us.
Yeah.
You're going to be around people. It's going to be fine. And
Yeah.
it usually is. And unless something is really telling me with that now experience,
Yeah.
no, I know myself. This is different.
Yeah.
Getting up and pushing myself to the other side
Yeah.
is more helpful.
Yeah.
But that's me.
Yeah.
And that's my anxiety. I think it's very individual.
Right.
I would want to know again, sort of, so my answer to that is no.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's healthy. And trauma is, if you get attacked in a garage, your trauma might translate into never wanting to go in a parking garage.
Yeah.
Now that incident can happen. It doesn't have to be a parking garage. Do you need to go in parking garages? Maybe,
Yeah.
maybe not. You can live a life without doing it.
Right.
I think there's ways to do it incrementally.
Yeah.
And help, again, to speak back to the earlier part on understanding the science and the neurotransmitters and understanding really that fear is about intuition and fear is about, what action needs to be taken. There's sort of internal questions.
Yes.
That can be really empowering. Does it mean that nothing bad's ever going to happen? Of course not.
Right.
We live in a world where bad things happen. I don't like saying that to little kids.
No.
I just say mommy comes back all day in my head going, yeah, but someday mommy's not going to come.
Yeah.
That's not
We'll
the
cross
story
that
to tell
bridge when we come
to
to
a
it.
2-year-old.
Yeah,
right?
you have to take development into consideration in terms of how honest you want to be.
Exactly. So these would be my clinical questions. Okay. Number one, is this impacting your day-to-day life in a negative way? And we can talk about what negative means to that person. Is this impacting your ability to have what I would call a functional life? Are you able to make a living? Are you able, like I said, have relationships, do things that we know create a healthy life?
Yeah.
I would also want to know, hey, what are you willing to try? What are you willing to do? And, also what happens if we don't do this? A lot of people have white coat syndrome fear or fear of going to the dentist.
Yeah.
And there's lots of techniques. Well, at some point you're going to have to go.
Right.
Or you have to get sedated. I think we live in enough options now.
We have science.
I think I don't know. I don't think trauma is something to conquer either.
I don't either. That's why I put conquer in parentheses.
I don't like that. I don't think, and I don't always think too that identifying the root cause, like, if we can pinpoint the time this happened, or oftentimes therapy is so psychodynamic and wants to go back. Yeah, it's an interesting piece historically for me to go back and go, oh, well, now that actually makes sense how I translated this into this and this and this. Yeah. But I still have to be in the present. Right. What do I do now?
Yes.
So for me, clinically, mental health is more about teaching you how to feel empowered in your own body. Yep. And it's not up to me to tell you when to be over your trauma. Yes. And I think everyone's their trauma. Doesn't matter if it's the fear of the dentist. Doesn't matter if you got attacked and raped in a parking garage. Right. Right. And trauma is what you're experiencing in your body after that event takes place.
Yeah. And I think that, it sounded like the people that were profiled in this documentary had at some point been deprived of agency and were in shitty situations and felt disempowered. And I can see why they would say, you know what? This is going to make me feel empowered. This is going to make me feel like I've conquered something, maybe not the actual trauma, but like I've done something to kind of face my fears and do, I don't know. I see
like the idea of that, but what a horrible, cruel thing to then take the very thing that they were looking for, which was freedom of saying no, enough. Yep. And then have that used against them. So fuck that guy.
It's the worst, but I'm actually curious as to how it would have gone down for them had had it not been so intensely frightening and had the safe word been respected, like, would they have emerged from that experience feeling different? I'm really curious about that, because then that goes to what we were talking about earlier. Fear it can be a fun thing if you're in an environment where you know you're safe and you can stop it.
Well, I want to mention a book real quick that I've been eyeing at. It's called The Language of Emotions, What Your Feelings Are Trying to Tell You by Carla McLaren.
Ooh.
They gave this to us in grad school, and I kind of like thumb through it for the class.
Yeah.
It's a phenomenal book. And I'm really glad we did this episode. But she talks about how the gifts of fear are intuition, focus, clarity, attentiveness, readiness, and vigor. That people who are able to actually tap into that not dorsal vagal. It's late in the night.
Amygdala.
I don't know. Sorry, I'm losing my focus here.
Yeah.
I don't have my fear on. But being able to stay in that state and function, like you're someone who's very good at staying in that state, and you can be clear.
It's from trauma.
Yes.
That's
my boyfriend's sister is very good at that. In the moment, she can just, okay, and this is what we're going to do. And here's what we're going to do. And then afterwards, she's like, oh shit, what just happened?
Totally.
I'm the opposite.
Yeah.
So it's intense. And so you're just because we have a belief system around what fear is, and we're usually thinking about the after effects of fear, which are anxiety and panic. Yeah. Fear itself is that very healthy, life-saving skill.
For sure. Yeah. And it might even be worse for those of us who do have trauma, because it's only a human response that our frontal lobe goes offline. But I think for those of us with trauma, we're like acutely aware of what's going on. And that's 100%. Why we're able to focus where other people would be like, nope, I'm going offline. I'm completely and totally afraid. And
that would have meant death.
Yeah.
In many ways.
Totally.
If your child body would have allowed you to do that. Yeah. Which would have been the safer way to go. And then the adults are supposed to take over and provide that affection. So your survival is mixed in with that, which is what makes it complex.
Yes.
PTSD.
Yeah. I'm hyper vigilant all the time. And that's why I think about these people, if they truly were experiencing trauma or were victims of trauma, how much worse it may have been for them, because they can't go offline. No. A lot of us can't go offline. I'm not going to say everybody with trauma, their brains react the same way, but a lot of us cannot go offline. Yeah. So you're processing all of this, and it is intense. Like, Jesus, I'd do anything to be able to just fucking shut it off and go into my lizard brain. Anyway. Yes, enough about trauma, but it's always fun. It's always a fun topic.
This actually peeks back into psychedelics. Yeah. And what that ability, which you and I are very afraid to do. Yeah. Or
I'm afraid to do it again. I've done it a lot.
But that's sort of a safer way to face your fears in a more spiritual context, with a purpose and an intention and anything like that, and be able to look at these things and see how much bigger you are than them. Right. Which is sort of psychologically what you do from a cognitive behavior standpoint, or even dialectical behavior. You're looking at this and going, okay, is this proportional? Okay, have I gone through something similar? You're talking yourself through, but you also have to go through that arc of that adrenaline, allow that rest, digest, allow that time with a friend, which happens through breathing, cold. I'll give you some lavender, Jen. We'll do some EMDR.
Well, no, EMDR
in my life for complex PTSD.
No, I tried EMDR. Went terribly wrong.
You. It did irritate you.
I was like, oh, this feels like my phone vibrating. Look up EMDR, guys. We're not going to go into that today, but we are going to talk about adrenaline junkies very briefly, because there are some people who just seem to be addicted to that feeling. Call it fear, call it excitement, but I think excitement and fear often intermingle, especially when you're like, oh, I don't know, scaling the face of a fucking cliff with no equipment.
Dude, I couldn't even, that's something
Free
I had to turn off.
I couldn't watch it.
I couldn't watch it either. I was like, why would I do this to myself?
I would hate being that dude's mother or his girlfriend. Yeah. He also seemed like a bit of a sociopath. But anyway, so according to this very well-mined article, adrenaline junkie is a term used to refer to someone who favors high-risk activities for the rush that accompanies them. The term was first popularly used in 1991 after the movie Point Break.
Yes.
Awesome. With the FBI.
Every surfer I've ever dated is the epitome of an adrenaline junkie.
Yes.
And
I
they
swear
usually
it's a
were
thing.
addicts too.
Yeah, no, oftentimes the two go hand in hand. So, related to this phenomenon, many people seek out high sensation experiences for the neuropsychological effects or neurophysiological effects and psychological. This is taking the love of fear one step further in the sense that these folks aren't getting their rush in a safe environment. They're often engaging in behavior that could legit lead to their deaths.
Yeah.
So according to this article, an unconscious need for stimulation may influence the way you manage your schedule, the people you spend time with, and even the way you approach a deadline. So, we all seek a little bit of that stimulation.
Yes. Well, that's the eustress, the fear that gets us to work on time, that gives us a little bit of that edge.
Yep.
We need that to survive.
Yep. And
in modern day.
Yeah. And I feel like I operate optimally when I have a little bit of stress, when I have a deadline, when I'm doing a lot, when they're,
Oh, totally.
I really like it actually. So, but yeah, it targets the same parts of the brain as like a rock climber, for instance. I keep using that as an example. Clearly I have a thing with heights, so that's my fear. But there's far less risk associated with not meeting a deadline, right? You may lose your job. That sucks, but you ain't going to die most likely.
Right.
So, oftentimes that need for constant stimulation and stress isn't even tied to an extreme activity. Everyone knows someone who thrives on chaos and drama. So, from the article again, they said, while leading an exciting life in and of itself isn't a problem, unwittingly creating crisis for yourself or becoming needlessly engulfed in stressful situations can take its toll. It's like my mom, total borderline personality disorder. She thrived on chaos. She went through a ton of trauma as a child. She never had a moment of peace, physical, emotional, psychological abuse, you name it. She experienced it. So it really kind of contributed to her not being able to not only have a healthy relationship, but to constantly creating chaos with whomever she was with.
Yeah.
Everything was a fight. She seemed to really thrive on it.
Yeah.
And so I got the distinct sense that this was something she needed, or at least it was a cycle that she didn't know how to break.
Well, and I think with that, oftentimes the sitting still.
Oh yeah.
Like for me, that's when I recharge.
Oh,
in
I can't
stillness.
sit still.
And it's really frightening.
Yeah.
Once you do sit still, you start thinking.
Yeah.
Or you start feeling. And if I have to sit and feel all those things that I don't want to deal with, that rush is going to actually look really good.
Yeah.
It's the same. It's that negative feedback loop that happens with addiction as well.
Yeah.
And it's the neurobiology kind of behind this whole process is so complicated, but you make a really good point in bringing up your mom.
Yeah.
Because there is that, like, again, that neurological psych perspective for, and it's again, the irony of calling them adrenaline junkies. It's trauma linked as well.
Yeah.
Not always. I think there are some people who just like that thrill and that rush. And I used to always say I would want to jump out of an airplane and go skydiving. And I kind of would say it, but in my heart, I was like, I'm not going to fucking do that. But there's been tons of studies about this. A 2009 study looked at brain stress systems in the amygdala and found the release, remember norepinephrine? I talked about in the amygdala, the one that gets you kind of excitable.
Yeah.
It's a key component of when they look at MRIs of brains, this is the area of the brain that's activated during the stress response and is a key component in that transition to the kind of the dependence on the rush for the thrill. Okay. So, if you've, let me keep going. So a 2017 review explored how neurotransmitter dopamine and serotonin also greatly impact the ability to regulate that impulsivity and risk taking. And when I think about this particularly with the king of the avenues, that ex who is a surfer, who ironically used to say when I'd be like, aren't you scared? He'd go, well, I'm doing what I love. If I died, I'm doing what I love.
Do you think maybe there's a deficit in serotonin for some of these folks?
I think the serotonin and the dopamine that comes after that adrenaline feels so good that you can get addicted to that alone. Okay. You see that with a lot of STDs, not STDs. but and really addiction, whatever the addiction is, shopping, sex, dating. Yeah. There's a lot of loneliness compared with this. And when you find something that for the first time gives you a rush of good, you're hooked.
Yeah. I was
Why
addicted
would
to
you
shopping
stop
for a
it?
really long time, and I didn't have the money to do it, but I was addicted to it because it gave me a sense of power and control and gratification. And
It works.
It worked.
Yeah.
It was temporary, but it worked.
Yeah. And,
So-
and that's the thing. If they're, and going kind of back to, the piece about the horror house. The horror house.
The horror house.
The horror house. That sounds.
Can't say that anymore.
No. I lost it. But it's a way to just feel. And if you've spent your life not feeling in your body,
Yep.
and then you do feel in your body, and you feel good, and it's right there.
Yeah.
That makes so much sense. And that's why it's so frustrating. Kind of, we're talking about several other episodes, but like the addiction piece where people think it's a choice at a certain extent.
Yeah.
That you're dealing with something that's neurobiologically and physiologically changing your brain. I will say that too, that your amygdala from trauma and from drug use or from these high highs or these low lows, it doesn't mean it can't restore and that you can't do other things. But there's changes that happen in the brain. And that might sound really depressing, but what I'll tell you is our brain is amazing. It's
you can retrain it.
You absolutely can. It's neuroplastic, which always sounded weird because I'm like, plastic seems hard.
Yeah.
But there's
soft plastic.
Yeah. There's things you can do, but it's crazy to me how, there's always going to be something you do that also gets you in that Zen space. And that's their focus. Obsessive compulsive disorder. I was going to say that was what I was thinking of, but it's the one time where everything does shut off around them and they're focused. And I feel like that's what you were talking about, where when you're busy or you're doing things, you're able to tap into stuff really clearly.
Yes.
And what might exhaust one person feels really invigorating too.
That's right.
So it's so individual specific.
It is. Yeah.
But you're absolutely right that there are just certain people who I think are wired to be okay with this.
Yeah.
And then there's other people who are wired not to. And is it good? Is it bad? I don't know. Like I said, what he said to me made a lot of sense. You're right. If that's how you die, you're doing what you love. It's kind of selfish when you think about all the other people in your life.
Yeah.
But, I don't know. And like you said, that you feel bad for his mom or his girlfriend or the rock climber, but they're doing what they love and they're so focused, and that's their everythingness. As someone who's incredibly scattered and like so many things and can never just pick one thing, I envy that a little bit. Yeah. Because they like one thing and they become amazing at it. Yeah. I like a lot of things and I'm kind of half-assed.
I'm not doing my 10,000 hours on anything specific, let me tell you. Yeah. So I'm never going to master shit. So we may have put 10,000 hours into this podcast. I'm not sure.
We've done a good job.
This is episode maybe 65.
64.
64. Yeah, that's a lot. And what is that? An hour roughly per episode? What is that? 60 times?
I don't.
I'm going offline. Yeah, my fear is kicking in. Numbers. So we'll leave you with that. We hope you enjoyed this. Now, I think my big takeaway from this is it's okay. I mean, we seem to, most of us, not all of us, but a lot of us share this need to tap into those stimulating, brain chemicals, whether it be through a horror film or something more extreme. But I think it's important to ask yourself why, why am I doing this? Why am I going into this immersive haunted house experience that seems absolutely terrifying? Like, what is it that what am I looking for? Yeah. What itch in my life has to be scratched? I think it's important to granted, if you just enjoy scary movies, whatever. Yes. But if it takes a more extreme form, maybe ask yourself.
Yeah. Or if you're having symptoms of more extreme hypervigilance. Yeah. Talk about if it's making you avoid things or if it's making you weird.
A little weird is good.
Little weird is good.
Yeah,
but like if you're like not doing certain things, but also like if you're afraid of elevators, use the stairs.
Yeah, totally. It's healthier anyway. Fuck it.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. We hope you enjoyed this.
Yay.
And you can follow us on TikTok at TWATJC. That's TWATJC. And if you click on YouTube, you can listen to us on YouTube if you seek to do it that way. But also on YouTube, you have access to our Apple and our Spotify links. So pick your fucking poison.
By the way, I love your shirt.
Oh yeah, I like yours too. So we had shirts made. They're a prototype. We're going to do a TikTok featuring these shirts. And if you want one of these shirts, just let us know, and we won't charge you an arm and a leg for them. Just cost. And we just love the fact that people are wearing our shirts and supporting us.
Yay!
Yay! We'll see you next week
Bye.
or whenever we get around to it. Bye.
Bye.